Imagine finding a penny that looks completely ordinary, yet it comes from one of the most important years in American coin history. A coin that millions of people have handled, spent, and forgotten, while a few special examples quietly became collector treasures. Today, we're talking about the 1964 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a small coin with a surprisingly big story. At first glance, this penny doesn't seem special. It's a Lincoln cent dated 1964, with no mint mark under the date. That simply means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. But this coin was struck during a time of major change in the United States, and that context is what makes it so fascinating. The Lincoln penny design had already been around for more than 50 years by 1964. Abraham Lincoln's portrait first appeared on the cent in 1909, honoring the 100th anniversary of his birth. By the early 1960s, this design was deeply familiar to Americans. Pennies passed through countless hands every day, used in grocery stores, vending machines, and pocket change across the country. The year 1964 was a turning point for U.S. coinage. America was experiencing rapid economic growth, and the demand for coins was enormous. At the same time, rising metal prices were creating serious problems for the U.S. Mint. Silver coins were being hoarded, and even copper-based coins like the penny were under pressure as production costs increased. Because of this, the Philadelphia Mint produced an enormous number of Lincoln pennies in 1964. There was no mint mark because Philadelphia traditionally did not use one on pennies at that time. These coins were made to circulate heavily, and they did exactly that. Most were worn down over decades of use, scratched, discolored, or lost forever. The 1964 penny is made mostly of copper, with a small amount of tin and zinc mixed in. This gave the coin its familiar reddish-brown color when new. Over time, exposure to air and handling caused many of these pennies to turn darker brown. Coins that remain bright red today are far less common and much more desirable to collectors. On the front of the coin, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words, "In God We Trust," above his head. Liberty appears to the left, and the date 1964 is to the right. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial is shown in fine detail. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made by the hundreds of millions? The answer lies in condition, rarity within the mass production, and minting mistakes. While most 1964 pennies are only worth 1 cent, a small number stand out for very specific reasons. One key factor is condition. A 1964 penny that looks worn, dull, or scratched is usually worth face value. But a coin that has never been in circulation, with sharp details and original red color, can be worth significantly more. Collectors grade coins on a scale, and high-grade examples from 1964 are surprisingly hard to find. Because so many were used immediately, mint errors are another reason some 1964 pennies attract attention. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process. These mistakes were not intentional, and most were caught and destroyed. A few escaped into circulation, and those are the coins collectors search for today. Some 1964 pennies show doubled letters or numbers, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled. Others were struck off-center, leaving part of the coin blank. There are also examples with cracks in the metal caused by damaged dies. Each error tells a story of how fast and intense coin production was during that year. Collectors are especially interested in well-documented errors that can be clearly seen without special tools. These coins can sell for tens, hundreds, or even thousands of dollars, depending on how dramatic the error is, and how well the coin has been preserved. Real auction results show how wide the value range can be. A typical circulated 1964 no-mint mark penny sells for 1 cent. An uncirculated example with strong red color might sell for a few dollars. But a top-quality coin, graded and certified by a professional service, has sold at auction for well over $100. Error coins from this year have reached much higher prices when verified and authenticated. Of course, popularity also brings the risk of fakes or misunderstandings. Many people believe they have a rare coin when they don't. To identify a genuine 1964 penny, start with the basics. The date should be clear and evenly shaped. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams, consistent with copper pennies of that era. The color should match natural copper tones, not something painted or altered. Be cautious of claims that every 1964 penny is rare. That simply isn't true. Value depends on condition, authenticity, and whether the coin has a recognized mint error. If you think you found something special, comparing it to verified examples and consulting a reputable coin dealer is always a smart step. There are also some fun and surprising details about this coin. In 1964, pennies were still considered important enough that people saved them in jars and drawers. Many Americans today still have childhood memories of filling piggy banks with coins just like this one. The 1964 penny was part of daily life during a time of major cultural change in the United States. Another interesting fact is that this penny comes from the final years before major changes in U.S. coin metals. Just a few years later, the mint would alter compositions and production methods to cut costs. The 1964 penny represents the end of an era when copper dominated American pocket change. Collectors love the 1964 no-mint mark Lincoln penny because it's accessible. Almost anyone can find one, but only a few will find one in exceptional condition or with a true mint error. That balance between common and rare is what keeps collectors searching through rolls of pennies even today. This coin also appeals to history lovers. Holding a 1964 penny is like holding a small piece of mid-20th century America. It was minted during the Civil Rights era, during the space race, and during a time when the nation was rapidly changing. Every scratch and mark tells part of that story. As you look through your own coins, remember that value isn't always about age alone. It's about condition, uniqueness, and history. A simple penny from 1964 can be either ordinary or extraordinary, depending on its journey. So the next time you spot a Lincoln penny with no mint mark and the date 1964, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. You might just be holding a small but meaningful piece of American history, quietly waiting to be noticed. Imagine holding a penny so ordinary that most people would never look twice at it. Yet it quietly represents a turning point in American history, the U.S. Mint, and the coins in our pockets today. A penny that millions spent without thinking, but collectors now stop and study carefully. This is the story of the 1968 mint mark Lincoln penny. The 1968 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in San Francisco. At first glance, it looks like a typical Lincoln cent, featuring President Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But behind this familiar design is a fascinating moment in U.S. coinage history, one that makes this penny more interesting than many people realize. To understand this coin, we need to step back to the late 1960s. America was going through major changes. The country was deeply involved in the Vietnam War, inflation was rising, and the U.S. Mint was facing a serious coin shortage. People were hoarding coins, especially silver coins, because precious metal prices were increasing. This caused everyday coins to disappear from circulation. To solve this problem, the U.S. Mint made several big decisions. One of the most important was restarting the use of mint marks on most coins in 1968. For several years before that, mint marks had been removed to discourage coin collecting and hoarding. But by 1968, the mint realized that removing mint marks did not solve the shortage, so they brought them back. That is where the 1968 Lincoln penny comes in. The S mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the San Francisco Mint. But here is something many people do not know. In 1968, the San Francisco Mint mainly focused on producing proof coins for collectors, not regular circulation coins. However, in that year, San Francisco also struck some business strike pennies meant for everyday use. This makes the 1968 Lincoln penny a special crossover coin. It exists in both proof form and regular circulation form, and that alone gives it a unique place in Lincoln cent history. The design of the 1968 penny follows the classic Lincoln cent style that Americans had seen since 1959. On the front or obverse is Abraham Lincoln's portrait, designed by Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, liberty to the left, and the date 1968 to the right. Just below the date is the small but important S mint mark. On the back or reverse is the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. The words "United States of America" appear across the top. E pluribus unum sits above the memorial, and 1 cent is displayed at the bottom. The metal composition of the 1968 Lincoln penny is also worth noting. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the same traditional bronze alloy used for decades. This was before the U.S. Mint switched to copper-plated zinc pennies in the early 1980s. Because of this, the coin has a solid copper feel and a warm reddish-brown color when well preserved. Now let's talk about what makes this penny stand out to collectors. On its own, a worn 1968 Lincoln penny is not rare. Millions were made, and many are still found in old jars, rolls, and collections. However, condition is everything in coin collecting. High-grade examples of this coin, especially those with strong luster and no wear, are much harder to find. Many 1968 pennies entered circulation and were quickly worn down. Finding one in brilliant, uncirculated condition is not easy today. Proof versions of the 1968 Lincoln penny are where collector interest really grows. Proof coins were specially made for collectors using polished dies and specially prepared blanks. They have sharp details, mirror-like fields, and frosted designs. The San Francisco Mint produced proof sets in 1968, and the Lincoln penny was part of those sets. Some proof coins show a feature known as deep cameo contrast, where the design appears frosty white against a dark, mirror-like background. These deep cameo proofs are especially desirable and can sell for significantly more than regular proofs. Another reason collectors watch this coin closely is the possibility of errors and varieties. While the 1968 penny is not famous for a single major error, smaller minting mistakes do exist. These include doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and weak strikes. Coins with visible errors, especially those confirmed by professional grading services, can be worth many times more than a normal example. There is also interest in strike quality. Some 1968 pennies show weaker details, particularly on Lincoln's hair or the Lincoln Memorial. Strongly struck examples stand out and attract attention from advanced collectors. So what are these coins actually worth? In circulated condition, a typical 1968 Lincoln penny is usually worth only a small premium over face value. However, uncirculated examples can sell for several dollars, depending on their quality. High-grade coins certified by grading companies can bring higher prices, especially if they receive top grades. Proof 1968 Lincoln pennies are more valuable. Standard proof examples often sell for a few dollars, but deep cameo proofs in excellent condition can sell for much more. At auctions, top-graded deep cameo proofs have sold for impressive amounts, showing that even a modern-era penny can be highly collectible. To identify a genuine 1968 Lincoln penny, start by checking the date and mint mark. The S should appear just below the date on the front of the coin. It should look clean and well-formed, not added or altered. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams, which is standard for bronze Lincoln cents of this era. Look closely at the surface. Proof coins will have mirror-like fields and very sharp details. Circulation coins will have a more satin or dull finish. Be cautious of altered coins, especially those that appear too perfect or have unusual mint marks. Using a magnifying glass can help you spot details and possible errors. If you believe you have a valuable example, consider having it authenticated and graded by a professional service. This not only confirms its authenticity, but also protects its value. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1968 Lincoln penny. It comes from the same era when the U.S. Mint began modernizing its production techniques. 1968 was the first year that proof coins were once again struck at San Francisco after proof production had moved between mints in earlier years. Another interesting detail is that many people unknowingly spent proof pennies. Over time, proof coins sometimes escaped from sets and entered circulation. This means it is possible, though rare, to find a proof 1968 penny in everyday change. Collectors today love the 1968 Lincoln penny because it represents a moment of transition. It marks the return of mint marks, the renewed focus on collectors, and the final decades of traditional copper pennies. It is accessible enough for beginners, yet complex enough to interest experienced collectors. This coin also reminds us that value is not always about age or rarity alone. History, condition, and story matter just as much. A simple penny can tell us about economic pressures, minting decisions, and changing times in America. So the next time you come across a 1968 Lincoln penny, take a closer look. Check for that small S mint mark. Think about where it came from and what was happening in the country when it was made. You might just be holding a small but meaningful piece of American history. And who knows? The most ordinary coin in your collection might be the one with the most interesting story waiting to be discovered. If you have a jar of old pennies at home, there's a real chance one small coin has been quietly waiting to be noticed for over 50 years. Today, we're looking at a penny most people spend without a second thought, yet collectors keep searching for it. The 1973 D. Lincoln penny. This coin may look ordinary at first glance, but its story connects to a turbulent time in American history, a major shift in the U.S. economy, and a moment when even the humble penny was almost changed forever. Understanding this coin can completely change how you look at the loose change in your pocket. The 1973 D. Lincoln penny was produced by the United States Mint in Denver. The D mint mark, located just below the date on the front of the coin, tells us exactly where it was made. In 1973, millions of pennies were struck in Denver and released into circulation across the country. These coins were meant to be used every day, passed from hand to hand, and eventually forgotten. But time has a way of turning everyday objects into historical artifacts. To understand why this penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1970s. America was going through big changes. Inflation was rising, the cost of living was increasing, and metals like copper were becoming more expensive. The U.S. Mint was under pressure because the penny itself was starting to cost nearly as much to make as it was worth. Despite these challenges, the Mint continued producing Lincoln cents using the traditional copper-based formula. The design of the 1973 D. Lincoln penny follows the classic Lincoln cent style that had already been in use for decades. On the front, or obverse, you see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, first introduced in 1909 to honor his 100th birthday. The words "In God We Trust" appear at the top, with liberty to the left of Lincoln's face and the date, 1973, to the right. Just below the date sits the small but important D mint mark. The back of the coin features the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been used since 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. Around the edges are the words "United States of America" and "E pluribus unum," with 1 cent displayed prominently in the center. This design would later be retired in 2009, making coins like the 1973 D a lasting reminder of the memorial era. In terms of metal, the 1973 D penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives it a solid feel and a warm, reddish-brown color when new. Over time, many of these coins darkened or turned brown due to circulation and exposure. Today, collectors pay close attention to color because it plays a major role in a coin's value. At first glance, you might think the 1973 D penny is common, and in many ways it is. The Denver Mint produced over 2.9 billion of these pennies in that single year. With numbers like that, rarity does not come from how many were made, but from how many survived in perfect condition. Most 1973 D pennies were heavily used. They were dropped, scratched, bent, and worn down over decades. Finding one today that still looks bright, clean, and nearly untouched is surprisingly difficult. This is where collectors begin to pay serious attention. Another reason collectors search for this coin is minting errors. During the early 1970s, the U.S. Mint was producing coins at an incredibly fast pace to meet demand. When speed increases, mistakes happen. Some 1973 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design appears shifted to one side. Others show doubled letters or numbers, where parts of the date or lettering appear doubled due to a misaligned die. There are also examples with die cracks, clipped planchets, and weak strikes. These errors were never meant to leave the mint, yet many slipped through and entered circulation. Today, error coins can be worth far more than a normal example, even if the coin shows some wear. So how valuable is a 1973 D Lincoln penny? In average circulated condition, it's usually worth just a few cents, mainly for its copper content. However, value changes dramatically when condition improves. A well-preserved, uncirculated coin with original red color can sell for several dollars. At the highest levels, things get even more interesting. Certified examples graded in near-perfect condition by professional grading services have sold for hundreds of dollars. In rare cases, top-quality 1973 D pennies with full red color and exceptional detail have reached prices over $1,000 at auction. These are coins that look almost exactly as they did the day they left the mint. Collectors love documented sales because they prove what people are actually willing to pay. Over the years, auction records have shown strong demand for high-grade 1973 D pennies. When two collectors compete for the same top-quality coin, prices can climb quickly. Of course, whenever money is involved, questions about authenticity follow. The good news is that fake 1973 D pennies are uncommon, but altered coins do exist. Some people add a fake D mint mark to a 1973 penny that originally had no mint mark. To identify a real one, look closely at the mint mark. On genuine coins, the D has a specific shape and position. If it looks uneven, oddly shaped, or improperly placed, that's a red flag. Weight is another clue. A genuine 1973 D penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A scale designed for coins can help confirm this. The color and sound of the coin can also reveal clues, as copper pennies have a distinct look and ring compared to modern zinc cents. One surprising fact about the 1973 D penny is how close it came to being very different. Around this time, the mint was experimenting with alternative metals due to rising copper prices. Just a few years later, in 1982, the penny would change composition entirely. That makes the 1973 D part of the final generation of traditional copper cents. Another fun detail is that many people unknowingly spend valuable examples every day. Because pennies are often overlooked, high-grade coins sometimes slip through rolls and collections without anyone noticing. Some of today's best examples were found decades later in old bank rolls or inherited jars of change. Collectors today are drawn to the 1973 D Lincoln penny for several reasons. It represents a key moment before major changes in U.S. coinage. It offers affordable entry into collecting, while still providing the thrill of searching for rare errors or top-condition pieces. And most importantly, it reminds us that history doesn't always come in gold or silver. Sometimes it comes in copper, worth just 1 cent. For many collectors, the excitement isn't just about money. It's about the hunt. It's about finding something overlooked and learning its story. The 1973 D penny connects everyday life to a specific moment in American history, and that connection is what keeps interest alive. So the next time you see a 1973 penny with a small D below the date, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check its condition. Look for unusual details. You might be holding a simple piece of change, or you might be holding a small copper witness to history that collectors are still searching for today. And that's what makes coins like the 1973 D Lincoln penny so fascinating. They remind us that even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary stories, if we're curious enough to listen. If you've ever dumped a handful of old pennies onto a table and wondered if one of them could be hiding a secret, this story is for you. Today we're talking about a penny most people overlook, a coin that quietly passed through millions of American hands, and yet still holds surprises that many collectors don't expect. This is the story of the 1975 D Lincoln penny. The 1975 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck by the United States Mint in Denver. The small letter D under the date tells us exactly where it was made. At first glance, it looks just like countless other Lincoln pennies from the 1970s. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. But as with many coins, the real story begins when you slow down and take a closer look. To understand this penny, we need to go back to the mid-1970s. America was going through a time of major change. The country had just come out of the Vietnam War era, inflation was high, and everyday Americans were feeling the pressure of rising prices. Coins like the Lincoln penny were essential to daily life. People used them for groceries, gas, and phone calls. In 1975 alone, the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies to meet demand. The Denver Mint played a major role that year. It struck well over 4 billion Lincoln cents in 1975, each carrying the D mint mark. These coins were made to circulate heavily, not to be saved or admired. No one at the time imagined they would one day be discussed in collector videos or searched for in old jars and drawers. The design of the 1975 D Lincoln penny follows a style that had already been in use for more than a decade. The front shows Abraham Lincoln, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. The portrait was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and has become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. On the back of the coin, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. Above the memorial are the words United States of America and E pluribus unum, while 1 cent sits at the bottom. One important detail about the 1975 D penny is its metal composition. Unlike modern pennies, which are mostly zinc, the 1975 penny is made of solid copper. Specifically, it is 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives the coin a slightly heavier weight and a richer color compared to newer pennies. Many collectors appreciate these older copper cents simply because they feel and sound different. So why do people talk about the value of a coin that was minted by the billions? The answer lies in condition, errors, and collector demand. While most 1975 D pennies are only worth 1 cent, or slightly more for their copper content, certain examples can be worth much more. Condition is everything in coin collecting. A 1975 D penny that has been heavily circulated, scratched, or worn down is common and carries little premium. But coins that were never used, known as uncirculated coins, are a different story. These coins still have their original shine, sharp details, and smooth surfaces. Finding a truly pristine example today is harder than it sounds. Some uncirculated 1975 D pennies have sold for surprising prices at auction. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold for anywhere from $20 to over $100, depending on their quality. That may not sound life-changing, but for a penny that once bought almost nothing, it's still impressive. Where things get more interesting is with mint errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process. These mistakes are accidental, and that's exactly why collectors love them. Error coins are often unique or produced in very small numbers. With the 1975 D Lincoln penny, known errors include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, leaving part of the coin blank. There are also broad strikes, where the coin was struck without the collar that normally shapes it, causing it to spread wider than usual. Clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank is missing, are another possibility. Error coins like these can sell for $50, $100, or even more, depending on how dramatic and clear the error is. Collectors are willing to pay a premium for mistakes that are easy to see and well-preserved. It's important to note that some famous Lincoln penny errors do not apply to the 1975 D coin. For example, the well-known 1975 doubled die penny was made at the Philadelphia Mint and does not have a mint mark. The Denver Mint version does not have that particular variety. This is a detail many people miss, leading to confusion and disappointment. If you think you might have a valuable 1975 D penny, knowing how to identify a real one is essential. Start by checking the date and mint mark. The date should read 1975, and the small d should appear just below it on the front of the coin. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams, which is standard for copper pennies of that era. Look closely at the details. A genuine coin will have clear lettering, natural wear patterns, and a consistent color. Be cautious of coins that look altered or damaged in unusual ways. Sometimes people mistake damage for mint errors, but true mint errors occur during production, not after the coin enters circulation. Using a magnifying glass can help you spot real errors and avoid false ones. If you believe you have something special, having the coin examined by a professional coin dealer or grading service is a smart step. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1975 D Lincoln penny. For example, because it is made of copper, some people collect these coins for their metal content alone, especially during times when copper prices rise. While melting pennies is illegal in the United States, the idea that a humble cent contains valuable metal adds to its appeal. Another interesting detail is how many of these coins are still out there. Even today, you can occasionally find a 1975 D penny in circulation. That means the hunt is still alive. Every roll of pennies, every old jar, and every inherited collection is a chance to rediscover a small piece of history. Collectors today love the 1975 D Lincoln penny not because it is rare in the traditional sense, but because it represents an era. It comes from a time when pennies were still made of copper, when coins were an essential part of daily transactions, and when the Lincoln Memorial design was a familiar symbol of American life. For new collectors, this coin is also an accessible starting point. It's affordable, easy to find, and full of learning opportunities. It teaches the basics of mint marks, condition, errors, and history, all through a single coin. So the next time you see a 1975 D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to examine it. Look at the shine, the details, and the small letter under the date. Think about where it's been and how many hands it has passed through over the last 50 years. Sometimes the most interesting stories aren't hidden in rare gold coins or famous treasures. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, in a simple copper penny that most people never think twice about. And that's what makes coin collecting so fascinating. The next great find could already be sitting right in front of you, waiting to be noticed. Most people would walk right past this coin without a second glance. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. And yet, a 1984 Lincoln penny with no mint mark has surprised collectors, sparked bidding wars, and turned pocket change into something far more interesting. The real question is simple. What makes this everyday penny worth talking about at all? This coin is known as the 1984 no mint mark Lincoln cent. The words no mint mark sound mysterious, but they actually tell us something very specific. It means the coin was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For most of U.S. history, coins struck in Philadelphia were not given a mint mark. So if you see a 1984 penny without a letter under the date, that is exactly where it came from. At first glance, this penny looks like millions of others. On the front, or obverse, you see Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty. To the left is the date, 1984. To the right is the phrase, In God we trust. On the back, or reverse, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design used from 1959 until 2008, with 1 cent and United States of America clearly displayed. So why was this coin made in the first place? In 1984, the United States was producing billions of pennies every year. Inflation had driven up the price of copper, and just 2 years earlier, in 1982, the U.S. Mint changed the composition of the penny. Instead of being mostly copper, pennies became zinc on the inside, coated with a thin layer of copper on the outside. The 1984 penny follows this newer formula, weighing about 2.5 grams instead of the heavier copper cents of earlier decades. The goal was simple: keep the penny affordable to make while still maintaining its familiar look. And for the most part, the plan worked. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck well over 4 billion pennies in 1984. With numbers like that, you might assume none of them could ever be valuable. But coin collecting has never been about just how many were made. It is about condition, mistakes, and the unexpected. One of the most important things to understand about the 1984 no mint mark penny is that most examples are only worth face value. If it is heavily worn, scratched, or damaged, it is still just a penny. Even clean, shiny examples found in everyday change are usually worth only a small premium. The story changes completely when we talk about errors. The most famous and desirable version of this coin is known as the 1984 double die obverse. This is not damage. It is not wear. It is a genuine minting error that happened during the creation of the coin's design dies. In simple terms, parts of the design were accidentally impressed twice, slightly out of alignment. On the 1984 double die penny, the doubling is most noticeable on Lincoln's ear. Collectors often call it the double ear penny. When you look closely, especially with a magnifying glass, Lincoln's ear appears thick, almost as if there is a second outline overlapping the first. Some doubling can also be seen in the lettering, but the ear is the key detail collectors look for. This small visual difference makes a huge impact on value. A normal 1984 no mint mark penny might be worth 1 cent, or maybe a few cents in excellent condition. A genuine 1984 double die penny can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on its condition. There have been real auction sales that prove this. High-grade examples, especially those certified by professional grading services, have sold for over $1,000. In some cases, near-perfect specimens have reached prices that shock people who never imagined a penny could do that. Condition plays a massive role. Coins are graded on a scale that measures wear, luster, and overall quality. A double die penny that looks dull or scratched will sell for far less than one with sharp details and bright surfaces. But even lower-grade examples are still valuable compared to face value. Because of these prices, many people wonder if their 1984 penny could be a fake or altered coin. This is a smart concern. When money is involved, counterfeits appear. The first step in identifying a real one is weight. A genuine 1984 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it is significantly heavier, it may not be authentic or may have been altered. Next, examine the surface. Real doubled die coins show doubling that is part of the metal itself. The doubled features will have the same texture and color as the rest of the coin. If the doubling looks flat, scratched, or uneven, it may be damage rather than a true error. Magnification is essential. A simple jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass can reveal details the naked eye cannot. Focus on Lincoln's ear. Look for clear separation and thickness, not just blur. If possible, compare it to images of confirmed doubled die examples from trusted coin references. For anyone serious about value, professional grading is the safest route. Reputable grading companies authenticate the coin, confirm the error, and seal it in a protective holder. This not only proves it is real, but also greatly increases buyer confidence if you ever decide to sell. Beyond errors, there are a few other interesting things about the 1984 no-mint mark penny. Because it is zinc-based, it is more prone to corrosion than older copper pennies. If the copper plating is damaged, the gray zinc core underneath becomes visible. This is why many 1984 pennies look spotted or dull today. Another fun detail is that despite the massive number produced, finding a true doubled die example in circulation is still extremely rare. Most were discovered years ago, but a few have turned up unexpectedly in rolls, jars, and inherited collections. This keeps hope alive for everyday people checking their change. Collectors love this coin not because it is flashy, but because it tells a story. It represents a time of change in U.S. coinage, when rising metal prices forced the mint to adapt. It also proves that even in the modern era, mistakes can happen, and those mistakes can become treasures. For beginners, the 1984 penny is a perfect lesson in coin collecting. It shows that value is not always obvious. It teaches patience, attention to detail, and the importance of learning before selling or spending. For experienced collectors, it remains a classic modern-era coin. It is well documented, widely recognized, and still exciting to hunt for. That combination keeps demand strong decade after decade. So the next time you see a 1984 penny without a mint mark, do not dismiss it too quickly. Hold it up to the light. Look closely at Lincoln's ear. Think about where it has been, how it was made, and what tiny details might be hiding in plain sight. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking coins carry the most surprising stories. And in the world of coin collecting, curiosity is often the first step toward discovery. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet quietly carries a story most people never stop to hear. A coin you may have handled hundreds of times, spent without thinking, and overlooked for decades. But what if that simple penny from 1987, with no mint mark, had more to say than you ever imagined? Today we're talking about the 1987 no mint mark Lincoln penny. This is one of those coins that doesn't scream rarity at first glance. It doesn't shine with silver. It doesn't come from the 1800s. And yet, it sits at a fascinating crossroads in American coin history, a time of change, mass production, and hidden surprises that collectors still watch closely. The 1987 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck in the United States during a year when billions of pennies were produced. When you see no mint mark under the date, it means the coin was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For most of U.S. history, Philadelphia pennies did not carry a mint mark at all. So no mint mark is actually normal, not a mistake. But normal does not always mean unimportant. To understand this coin, we need to step back to 1987. America was deep into the modern era. Cash registers were everywhere, credit cards were growing in use, and yet the penny still played a major role in daily life. Every store, every vending machine, every pocket change tray depended on the humble 1-cent coin. The U.S. Mint was producing pennies by the billions to keep up with demand. The Lincoln cent itself had already been around for nearly 80 years by 1987. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it became the longest-running design in U.S. coinage history. By 1987, Lincoln's familiar profile on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back were deeply embedded in American culture. The reason the 1987 penny is especially interesting is the metal it's made from. In 1982, the U.S. Mint made a major change. Rising copper prices made solid copper pennies too expensive to produce. So the mint switched to a new composition, a core of zinc coated with a thin layer of copper. By 1987, all pennies were made this way. That change created a clear dividing line in penny history. Preminus 1,982 pennies were mostly copper. Postminus 1,982 pennies, including the 1987 no-mint mark, are mostly zinc. This may sound technical, but it matters a lot to collectors because zinc pennies behave differently over time. They can corrode, bubble, or deteriorate if the copper coating is damaged. That means finding a clean, well-preserved 1987 penny decades later is harder than many people expect. Design-wise, the coin keeps things classic. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the date 1987 and the word Liberty. If there is no letter below the date, that confirms it was struck in Philadelphia. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, with the words United States of America and 1 cent. Inside the memorial, if you look very closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln, making this one of the most detailed designs ever used on a U.S. coin. Now let's address the big question. Is the 1987 no-mint mark penny rare or valuable? In general, most 1987 Philadelphia pennies are very common. Millions were made, and many are still in circulation today. In worn condition, they are usually worth face value, just 1 cent. Even in average uncirculated condition, they often sell for only a small premium. But this is where things get interesting. Value doesn't always come from age alone. It comes from condition, mistakes, and exceptions. Some 1987 no-mint mark pennies were struck with mint errors. These are the coins collectors actively hunt for. Examples include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly centered on the coin. There are also double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a mistake in the die used to strike the coin. These doubling effects are not the same as simple wear or damage, and trained collectors can spot the difference. Another error collectors look for is a clipped planchet. This happens when a piece of metal is improperly cut before striking, leaving the coin with a curved or straight missing section. When authentic, these errors can dramatically increase the value. There are also rare cases of weak strikes, where parts of the design appear faint, and broad strikes, where the coin spreads out wider than normal. While none of these errors are common, they do exist. And when found on a 1987 no-mint mark penny, they can sell for anywhere from tens to hundreds of dollars, depending on the type and severity. Condition plays a huge role as well. A 1987 penny that has never been circulated, with full mint luster and no visible damage, can be graded by professional services. In very high grades, especially near-perfect examples, collectors may pay significantly more than face value. These coins are difficult to find because zinc pennies are easily damaged during storage and handling. There have been auction examples where high-grade 1987 no-mint mark pennies, especially those graded at the top of the scale, sold for surprising amounts compared to what most people expect from a modern penny. While these prices are not in the thousands, they show that condition alone can transform an everyday coin into a collectible. Of course, whenever there is value, there is also the risk of confusion or misinformation. So how do you identify a real 1987 no-mint mark penny? First, check the date. It must clearly read 1987. Second, look below the date. If there is no letter, that's correct for Philadelphia. If you see a D or S, it's from Denver or San Francisco and is a different coin. Third, examine the color and weight. A real 1987 penny should have a copper-colored surface but feel relatively light, since it's mostly zinc. If it looks unusually thick, heavy, or oddly colored, it may be damaged or altered. Be cautious of claims about solid copper 1987 pennies. By that year, copper pennies were no longer being made for circulation. Claims of 1987 pennies being struck on copper planchets are extremely rare and require professional verification. If someone claims to have one, it should be authenticated by a trusted grading service. Here's a fun fact many people don't know. If you drop a 1987 penny, it makes a slightly different sound than older copper pennies. That's because of the zinc core. It's a subtle difference, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it. This simple test has become a favorite trick among coin enthusiasts. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln Memorial design used on this coin would only last a few more years. In 2009, The mint changed the reverse design to honor Lincoln's life stages, and later introduced the Union Shield. That makes the 1987 penny part of the final decades of a classic American design that spanned generations. Collectors love the 1987 no mint mark penny not because it's flashy, but because it represents everyday America. It's the kind of coin that passed through millions of hands, bought groceries, filled parking meters, and sat in jars on kitchen counters. It reminds collectors that history isn't only made of gold and silver. Sometimes, history is zinc and copper, quietly doing its job. For many collectors, this coin is a gateway. It teaches beginners how to evaluate condition, how to look for errors, and how to understand mint marks. It proves that even modern coins deserve a second look. And for experienced collectors, it's a challenge to find the best possible example of something most people ignore. So the next time you see a 1987 penny with no mint mark, don't rush to spend it. Hold it up to the light. Look closely at the date, the letters, and Lincoln's face. Ask yourself where it's been and how many stories it has passed through unnoticed. Because sometimes, the most ordinary coin in your pocket isn't just spare change. It's a quiet piece of American history, waiting for someone curious enough to stop and listen. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet carries a quiet story of American history, massive production, and a few rare surprises that collectors still search for today. This is the story of the 2007 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that proves even modern pocket change can be more interesting than it seems. The 2007 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint in the year 2007. The small letter D, found just below the date on the front of the coin, tells us exactly where it was made. At first glance, this penny looks like millions of others, but behind its familiar design is a moment in time when America was on the edge of major economic change, and the Lincoln cent was nearing the end of one of its longest-running designs. In 2007, the United States Mint was still producing the Lincoln Memorial penny, a design that had been used since 1959. This was the final full year before the historic Lincoln bicentennial redesigns of 2009. So while the 2007 D penny was not made to celebrate a special anniversary, it represents the closing chapter of an era that lasted exactly 50 years. The coin was created for everyday use. In 2007, pennies were still widely used in cash transactions across the country. Vending machines, parking meters, and everyday purchases all relied on 1-cent coins. The Denver Mint worked nonstop, producing over 3 billion Lincoln cents that year. A large portion of those carried the D mint mark, making the 2007 D penny one of the most commonly encountered modern cents. The front of the coin features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. Lincoln faces to the right, with the word liberty behind him and the phrase "In God we trust" above. The date 2007 sits to the right of Lincoln's portrait, with the small D mint mark just below it. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall and centered. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. This level of detail made the reverse design iconic, even though many people never noticed it during everyday use. The metal composition of the 2007 D penny is another important detail. Like all Lincoln cents made after 1982, it is primarily zinc, with a thin copper coating. The coin weighs about 2.5 grams, much lighter than older solid copper pennies. This change was made to reduce production costs as copper prices increased. So far, nothing about this coin sounds rare or valuable, and for the most part, that is true. A typical 2007 D penny in circulated condition is usually worth exactly 1 cent. Even in uncirculated condition, most examples sell for only a small premium, often just a few cents to $1. But this is where the story gets more interesting. Collectors know that value is not always about age or mintage numbers. Sometimes, value comes from mistakes. And the 2007 D Lincoln penny is known for a small number of mint errors that can make certain examples far more desirable than the average coin. One of the most talked about errors is the double die. This happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during its creation, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On some 2007 D pennies, doubling can be seen on the date, the word liberty, or the phrase "In God we trust." These are not easy to spot with the naked eye, But under magnification, the doubling becomes clear. Another error collectors look for is off-center strikes. This occurs when the coin blank is not properly aligned during striking, resulting in a design that is shifted to one side. Depending on how dramatic the error is, these coins can sell for anywhere from $10 to several $100s. There are also cases of clipped planchets, where a portion of the coin is missing due to a metal cutting error during production. These coins often have a smooth, curved missing edge and are popular with error collectors. Perhaps the most surprising finds are coins struck on the wrong planchet. While extremely rare, a 2007 D penny accidentally struck on a blank meant for another denomination or metal type could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars if authenticated. Real auction results show that while normal examples remain inexpensive, error coins tell a very different story. Some certified 2007 D double die pennies have sold in the range of $50 to $300, depending on strength and condition. Dramatic off-center strikes have reached similar prices. These sales prove that even a modern penny can become valuable under the right circumstances. Condition also matters more than many people realize. A flawless 2007 D penny, graded at the highest mint state levels, by professional grading services, can sell for significantly more than face value. While still not life-changing money, these coins are actively collected by people who specialize in high-grade modern cents. Identifying a genuine 2007 D Lincoln penny is fairly simple. First, check the date and look for the D mint mark just below it. The coin should have a copper-colored surface, though wear may reveal gray zinc underneath. The edges should be smooth, and the weight should be close to 2.5 grams. To avoid fakes or altered coins, be cautious of added mint marks. Some people attempt to add a D to a Philadelphia penny to create a fake Denver issue. Under magnification, an added mint mark often looks raised, uneven, or incorrectly positioned. A genuine mint mark will appear clean and well-defined, matching the style used by the U.S. Mint that year. Fun facts make this coin even more interesting. In 2007, the U.S. Mint was already debating the future of the penny due to rising production costs. It actually cost more than 1 cent to make each penny, a problem that still exists today. The 2007 D penny comes from a time when the penny's role in American commerce was already being questioned. Another interesting detail is that many 2007 pennies were saved by collectors simply because they were in good condition. This means that while the coin is common, finding one with absolutely no scratches, spots, or wear is harder than it sounds. Collectors today appreciate the 2007 D Lincoln penny not for its rarity, but for what it represents. It is part of the final generation of Lincoln memorial cents. It reflects modern minting technology, massive production numbers, and the transition toward commemorative redesigns that followed just 2 years later. For beginner collectors, this coin is often an entry point. It is affordable, easy to find, and offers a chance to learn about grading, errors, and mint marks without high risk. For advanced collectors, the hunt focuses on perfection and rare mistakes hidden among billions of ordinary coins. The 2007 D Lincoln penny reminds us that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in small details, in tiny errors, or in historical context that only becomes clear with time. So the next time you see a penny dated 2007, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over. Look for the D, check the details. Because even one of the most common coins in America can still hold a story worth discovering. Most people would never look twice at a 2014 penny. It feels modern, ordinary, and forgettable. But what if I told you that one small detail on this coin has confused millions of Americans, sparked endless online searches, and quietly turned everyday pocket change into something collectors actually pay attention to? This is the story of the 2014 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that looks simple on the surface, but carries a surprising story about how U.S. money is made, why people think it might be rare, and what truly makes certain examples valuable today. The 2014 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin issued by the United States Mint during a year when pennies were already becoming controversial. By 2014, it cost more than 1 cent to make a single penny, and many Americans were questioning whether the coin would even survive into the future. Yet billions were still produced, quietly moving through wallets, cash registers, and jars across the country. When people talk about a no mint mark penny, it often sounds mysterious. For many, it raises an immediate question. If there's no mint mark, does that mean it's rare? Was it a mistake? Was it made secretly? The answer is more interesting and much simpler than most people expect. In 2014, pennies were struck at several U.S. mint facilities. Coins made in Denver carry a small D below the date. Coins made in San Francisco usually carry an S and are often proof coins made for collectors. But pennies made in Philadelphia, the original U.S. Mint, traditionally carry no mint mark at all. So a 2014 penny with no mint mark means it was made in Philadelphia, just as millions of pennies have been for generations. The Lincoln penny itself has a long and important history. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it became the first U.S. circulating coin to feature a real person. By 2014, the design had already gone through several changes, but Lincoln remained at the center of America's most familiar coin. The 2014 penny features Lincoln's portrait on the front, facing right, with the words, "In God We Trust," above his head. Liberty appears behind him, and the date sits in front of his face. The back of the coin shows the Union Shield design, which was introduced in 2010. This shield represents Lincoln's preservation of the United States as one strong union, with a banner across the shield reading 1 cent. The metal composition of the 2014 penny is another detail many people find surprising. While older pennies were made mostly of copper, by 2014 the coin was primarily zinc. Each penny contains about 97.5% zinc, with only a thin copper coating on the outside. This change happened in 1982, but many people still assume all pennies are solid copper. So if the 2014 no mint mark penny is so common, why do people search for it so often? The answer lies in a mix of misunderstanding, hope, and the very real possibility of errors. Most 2014 no mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. They were produced in huge numbers, and circulated examples are everywhere. However, collectors don't just look at dates. They look at condition, unusual features, and mistakes made during the minting process. And that's where things get interesting. Some 2014 pennies were struck with errors. These errors were not intentional, but they slipped through quality control and entered circulation. A penny with a clear minting error can be worth far more than face value, even if the date itself is common. One example is a doubled die error. This happens when the coin design is impressed twice slightly out of alignment, causing doubling on letters or numbers. On some 2014 pennies, collectors have found noticeable doubling on "In God We Trust" on the date, or on Lincoln's profile. Genuine doubled die coins are popular and can sell for anywhere from $20 to several $100s depending on clarity and condition. Another error collectors look for is an off-center strike. This occurs when the blank coin planchet is not properly aligned during striking. The result is a penny where part of the design is missing, shifted, or cut off. Dramatic off-center strikes from 2014 can sell for $50 to over $100, especially if the date is still visible. There are also clipped planchet errors, where part of the coin's edge is missing due to a cutting mistake at the mint. These errors are easy to spot and are often saved by collectors who know what to look for. In rare cases, pennies from 2014 have been found with wrong planchet errors, meaning the coin was struck on metal meant for another denomination. These are extremely uncommon, but when confirmed by experts, they can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Condition also matters. A 2014 no mint mark penny in everyday circulated condition is worth 1 cent. But a coin that has never been used, known as an uncirculated coin, can be worth more to collectors. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold for $5, $10 or more, not because they are rare, but because they are perfectly preserved. At auctions, most standard 2014 Philadelphia pennies sell in bulk for small premiums. But error coins tell a different story. Verified doubled die or major strike errors from this year have appeared in collector auctions and online marketplaces with strong interest. The value depends on how dramatic the error is and how well it has been authenticated. This brings us to an important topic: how to identify a real coin versus a fake or altered one. Because people hope to find valuable pennies, some coins are intentionally damaged to look like errors. Scratches, filing marks, or altered edges are not mint errors. True errors occur during production and usually show smooth, natural metal flow rather than rough or sharp damage. If you think you have a valuable 2014 penny, Use a magnifying glass and look closely at the lettering and edges. Compare it to a normal penny from the same year. If something looks unusual but clean and consistent, it may be worth having it checked by a professional coin dealer or grading service. One surprising fact about the 2014 penny is how many were saved by collectors despite being modern. Because people are constantly searching for valuable pennies online, millions of 2014 coins were pulled from circulation and stored in jars and rolls. This actually makes truly high-grade examples harder to find in the future, as zinc pennies tend to corrode easily if not stored properly. Another fun detail is that the Union Shield design on the back represents the longest-running reverse design in recent penny history. By 2014, it had already become familiar, but it also marked a shift away from more artistic designs towards symbolic simplicity. Collectors today are drawn to the 2014 no mint mark penny not because it is legendary or ancient, but because it represents modern American coinage. It shows how mass production, small mistakes, and public curiosity can turn even a common coin into something worth examining. This penny also reminds collectors that value is not always about age. Some of the most interesting coins are hiding in plain sight, overlooked because they feel too new to matter. As you check your change, the next 2014 penny you see might look ordinary, but now you know its story. You know why it has no mint mark. You know what details to look for. And you know that even in the modern age, coins still carry secrets waiting to be discovered. So the next time you hear someone say a no mint mark penny could be special, you'll understand the truth behind the mystery. And you might just pause for a second before spending that penny, because sometimes the most common coins are the ones that teach us the most. Have you ever emptied your pocket change onto a table and wondered if one ordinary-looking penny might be hiding a story no one ever told you? What if a coin from just a few years ago, something most people spend without a second thought, actually has details that collectors quietly look for every day? Today we're talking about the 2016 no mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like a modern, everyday coin. But once you understand why it exists, how it was made, and what collectors pay attention to, this simple penny becomes far more interesting than most people expect. The 2016 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin issued by the United States Mint. When it has no mint mark, it means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. For most of U.S. history, Philadelphia did not place a mint mark on pennies, so a missing letter under the date is not an error by itself. It is a tradition. That small detail often confuses people, especially newer collectors, and it's one reason this coin gets so many questions. The year 2016 sits in a unique place in modern American coinage. It was a time when cash use was already declining, but pennies were still being produced in huge numbers. The Lincoln cent was still seen as a symbol of American history, even as debates continued about whether the penny should exist at all. The design of the 2016 penny follows the modern Lincoln Shield reverse, which was introduced in 2010. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's profile, a design first created by Victor David Brenner in 1909. This makes the Lincoln cent the longest-running portrait design of any U.S. coin. By 2016, Lincoln had been appearing on the penny for more than a century. The reverse side shows a shield with vertical lines and a banner across the top that reads E pluribus unum. The shield represents unity and strength, symbolizing the nation Lincoln fought to preserve. Even though this design is modern, it carries very old ideas about American identity. Now let's talk about what the coin is made of, because this surprises many people. The 2016 Lincoln penny is not mostly copper. It is made of zinc with a thin copper coating. Specifically, it is about 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper. This change happened back in 1982, when copper became too expensive to use in large quantities for 1-cent coins. Because of this, the 2016 penny feels slightly different from older pennies. It is lighter, and if damaged, it can show a grayish zinc core underneath the copper surface. This composition plays an important role when it comes to errors and collector value. So why would anyone care about a 2016 penny when millions were made? The answer lies in condition, errors, and small details that most people never notice. In regular circulated condition, a 2016 no mint mark penny is usually worth 1 cent. That part is important to understand. This is not a coin where every example is valuable. However, collectors are not looking for average coins. They are looking for exceptional ones. Uncirculated examples, meaning coins that were never used in daily transactions, can be worth more. A bright, clean 2016 penny with full detail and nowhere can sell for a small premium, especially if it grades high. Coins certified in top mint state condition by professional grading services can sell for several dollars, sometimes more, depending on demand. Where things get truly interesting is with errors. Error coins are mistakes made during the minting process, and they are highly collectible because they are unintentional and often rare. Some 2016 no-mint mark pennies were struck off-center. This means the design is not properly aligned on the coin. If the date and part of Lincoln's face are still visible, these coins can sell for anywhere from $20 to a few $100s, depending on how dramatic the error is. Another error collectors look for is a broad strike, where the coin was struck without the collar that normally shapes the edge. These coins appear wider than normal and lack a raised rim. Broad-struck 2016 pennies have sold for $50 or more. There are also doubled die errors, where parts of the design appear doubled due to a misaligned die. On some 2016 pennies, collectors search the lettering, Lincoln's eye, and the date for doubling. Genuine doubled die coins can command strong prices, especially when the doubling is clear and verified. One of the most valuable types of errors involves wrong planchets. This happens when a coin is struck on a metal blank intended for a different coin. While rare, a 2016 penny struck on the wrong planchet could sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the metal and condition. Real auction results show that while most 2016 pennies are common, error coins are not ignored. Certified error examples from this year have sold through major auction houses and online platforms for impressive amounts, especially when accompanied by professional grading and clear documentation. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 2016 no-mint mark penny and avoid confusion. First, look directly below the date on the front of the coin. If there is no letter, it was made in Philadelphia. That alone does not make it rare or valuable. Next, check the weight. A standard 2016 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. A significant difference could indicate an error or damage. Use a precise scale if possible. Examine the coin under good lighting. Look closely at the letters, the date, and Lincoln's face. True mint errors usually look natural and consistent. Damage that happened after the coin left the mint often looks messy, uneven, or scraped. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to remove mint marks or modify coins to make them appear special. A magnifying glass can help you spot tool marks or unnatural surfaces. Professional grading services are the safest way to confirm authenticity and value, especially for error coins. They can tell the difference between a real mint error and post-mint damage. There are also some fun facts about the 2016 Lincoln penny that many people don't know. In 2016, the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies across all mints, yet only a tiny fraction will ever interest collectors. This makes finding a genuine error feel like winning a small treasure hunt. Another interesting detail is that 2016 was one of the last years before the Philadelphia Mint began placing a P mint mark on pennies in 2017. That means the 2016 no mint mark penny represents the end of a very long tradition. Collectors also enjoy modern pennies like this because they are accessible. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to start searching. Many collectors began their journey by checking pocket change, and coins like the 2016 penny keep that tradition alive. Today, collectors appreciate the 2016 no mint mark Lincoln penny not because it is old, but because it represents modern American coinage at a turning point. It connects history, tradition, and the everyday experience of money in a changing world. For some, it is a reminder that even common objects can have hidden stories. For others, it is a chance to learn, search, and maybe discover something unexpected. So the next time you see a 2016 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check the details, weigh it, study it under the light. Because sometimes, the most ordinary coins are the ones that teach us the most about how money is made, how history continues, and how curiosity can turn spare change into a fascinating journey. And who knows, the next penny you almost spend might be the one that makes you stop, look again, and wonder what else you've been overlooking all along. Most people would never stop to look twice at a 2018 penny. But what if I told you that one small detail on a 2018 Lincoln cent could turn an ordinary coin into something collectors actively search for? And what if that coin is already sitting in your pocket right now, Today we're talking about the 2018 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like just another modern cent. But behind this simple copper-colored coin is a story of American history, massive production numbers, surprising errors, and a few examples that have sold for far more than face value. The 2018 D Lincoln penny was made in the United States and struck at the Denver Mint. The small letter D, just below the year, tells us exactly where it came from. This coin is part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series, which began all the way back in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. More than a century later, Lincoln is still on the penny, making it one of the longest-running designs in American coin history. By 2018, the Lincoln cent was no longer just spare change. It had become a symbol of tradition. Even though the penny costs more to make than it's worth, the U.S. Mint continued producing it because of its deep cultural and historical value. In 2018 alone, billions of pennies were struck, and the Denver Mint produced a large portion of them. The front of the 2018 D penny features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and has been used with small changes for generations. Lincoln faces to the right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, Liberty to the left, and the date with the D Mint mark to the right. It's a design that most Americans recognize instantly. The back of the coin shows the Union Shield design, which was introduced in 2010. This shield represents Lincoln's role in preserving the United States during the Civil War. The 13 vertical stripes stand for the original 13 states, and the horizontal bar at the top represents the federal government holding the nation together. Above the shield are the words United States of America, and across the shield is the phrase E pluribus unum, meaning out of many one. In terms of metal, the 2018 D Lincoln penny is made primarily of zinc with a thin copper coating. This composition has been used since 1982. While it may look like solid copper, the copper layer is actually very thin. This change was made decades ago to reduce costs, but it also means modern pennies are lighter and more vulnerable to damage than older copper cents. So if billions were made, why would anyone care about a 2018 D penny? The answer lies in condition, errors, and collector demand. Most 2018 D pennies you'll find are worth exactly 1 cent. However, collectors are always searching for coins in unusually high condition. A penny that has never been circulated, meaning it shows no wear, scratches, or discoloration, can be worth significantly more than face value. Coins graded in near-perfect condition by professional grading services are especially desirable. Then there are mint errors. This is where things get interesting. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process, and modern coins are no exception. Some 2018 D pennies were struck with off-center designs, where part of the image is missing. Others show doubled details, where letters or numbers appear slightly repeated. There are also pennies with die cracks, weak strikes, or missing design elements. One of the most talked about errors involves improper plating. Because modern pennies are zinc with a copper coating, sometimes that coating is incomplete or uneven. This can give the coin a strange, pale appearance or visible streaks. While not all plating issues are valuable, dramatic examples can attract strong collector interest. In rare cases, a penny may be struck on the wrong type of blank. These errors are extremely uncommon, but when they do occur, they can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Even a minor error can push the value far beyond 1 cent if collectors find it unusual enough. Real-world sales show how much condition and errors matter. While a typical circulated 2018 D penny sells for face value, uncirculated rolls can sell for a premium. High-grade examples that have been professionally graded have sold for several dollars each. Error coins, depending on the type and severity, have sold anywhere from $20 to several $100s at auctions and online marketplaces. Collectors pay close attention to grading. A coin graded MS, meaning mint state, with a high number like 67 or higher, can command strong prices because so few modern pennies survive in that level of perfection. Tiny flaws that the average person would never notice can make a big difference in value. If you're wondering how to identify a real 2018 D penny, it's actually quite simple. Start by checking the date and mint mark. The date should read 2018, and the small letter D should appear just below the year. The coin should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it feels unusually heavy or light, That could be a red flag or possibly an error worth investigating. Look closely at the design details. Genuine coins have sharp lettering, clear lines in Lincoln's portrait, and a well-defined shield on the back. Be cautious of coins that look cast, blurry, or unusually thick. Counterfeit pennies are rare because of the low face value, but altered coins do exist, especially when people try to fake errors. A magnifying glass can be very helpful. Check for doubling in the letters, cracks in the surface, or areas where the copper coating looks unusual. If something looks different compared to other pennies from the same year, it might be worth a closer look. One fun fact about the 2018 D penny is that it was made during a time when many people were questioning whether the penny should continue to exist at all. Despite debates about eliminating the cent, millions of Americans still collect them, search through rolls, and enjoy the thrill of finding something unexpected. Another interesting detail is that modern pennies like the 2018 D often survive in better condition than older coins because many people save them immediately. This creates competition among collectors for the best examples, driving up prices for top-grade coins even when the date itself is common. Collectors love the 2018 D Lincoln penny not because it's rare in numbers, but because it represents modern American coinage. It's accessible, affordable, and still full of surprises. For new collectors, it's an easy entry point into the hobby. For experienced collectors, it's a challenge to find the best condition or the most dramatic error. There's also a sense of connection. This is a coin that passed through countless hands during a recent year in American history. It was used during a time of rapid change, digital payments, and growing nostalgia for physical money. Holding one is like holding a small piece of modern history. As you go through your pocket change, don't overlook the pennies. The 2018 D Lincoln cent may seem ordinary, but under the right conditions, it can be something special. Whether it's a flawless example or an unexpected error, this coin proves that even the smallest denomination can still capture attention. So the next time you see a 2018 penny with a tiny D mint mark, take a closer look. You might just be holding a coin that tells a bigger story than you ever expected. And sometimes, the most interesting treasures are hiding in plain sight.